Hello to all of you joining us from around the United States and the globe. It is noon in the Eastern time zone of the United States and time for us to begin. But whatever time it is for you locally, we're just very glad to have you with us. My name is Bill Gibbs. I'll be the moderator and host for the session today, and I'd like to welcome you to CapTech Talks webinars and to our special presentation today. We'll be hearing from Dr. William Butler on protecting critical infrastructure, cybersecurity issues. I'll introduce him in just a little bit more detail and we'll get right into it. Just a few odds and ends before we begin. Here's the agenda that we'll be following today. Many of you are quite familiar with Capitol, but a few might not be, and so we'll have one slide just devoted to a little bit about what the university is all about. Some session pointers, and if you've joined us in other sessions, you'll have heard this before. Then I'll be introducing the presenter, Dr. William Butler. I'll give him the floor and he'll be taking the bulk of our time together. Following the presentation, we'll have the opportunity for Q&A. And then at the very end, after the presentation is over, I'll talk briefly about upcoming webinars through the spring and also how to get a copy of the recording, slides, and a certificate of participation. And to let you know, we are recording the session so that for any reason you have to drop by out or go on to your other projects. It is lunchtime, so you might even have to get a bite to eat. We are recording the session so that those who are able to not join us later will be okay. All right, now let's go ahead and get started. I just noticed that Walner, you do not have audio. I think everyone else does. So you may want to reboot and come back into the session again or check all your settings. Let's move ahead. A little bit about Capitol. Again, many of you are quite familiar with the organization. In fact, I noticed several of you are adjuncting for us or full-time students with us. Capitol is a nonprofit, private accredited university located in Laurel, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And it's established a long, long time ago in 1927. So this decade we'll be celebrating our 100th anniversary. Each of those words, nonprofit, private, accredited, are very important, but I want to focus primarily on the accredited part. Many people ask us about this. We are accredited by the Commission of Higher Education of the Middle States Association of Colleges and Schools. In the United States, this is regional accreditation, which is the highest level of accreditation available to a university, and that is what we have. We're in the state of Maryland in the United States, and we're also authorized by our state to confer degrees all the way from a 2-year associate's degree right up to our doctoral degrees, including those who are working on master's and bachelor's degrees. Some session pointers, and I keep this quick so that we can get and spend most of our time on our presentation. We will answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation, but you can post them at any time in the text chat. Will not be activating microphones or cameras for participants today, but we are monitoring the text chat very closely. At any time, type in a comment or a question. We will circle back at the end of the presentation and pick up all of those to make sure within the time that we have. The session will last just approximately 1 hour. A link to the recording as well as to the slides will be sent to all registrants, and that includes those who are viewing it on live right now and those who will view it later on demand. And we will be able to send a participation certificate, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. Again, this presentation is called Protecting Critical Infrastructure, Cybersecurity Issues. It's presented by Dr. William Butler. And let me get out my cheat sheet so that I can talk just a little bit about our presenter. Our presenter today is Dr. William Butler. He's the Chair of Cyber and Information Security at Capitol Technology University, as well as the Director of the Center for Cyber Research and Analysis at the university. His career has included industry, working as a network engineer and consultant in the also in the United States military. He's a retired colonel, 30-year veteran, active duty and reserve of the U.S. Marines, where he was a communications information systems officer. He holds degrees from Brenau, the Marine Corps University, the U.S. Army War College, the National Defense University, and the University of Maryland. And perhaps most importantly in our context, He has a PhD in cybersecurity from Capital Technology University. Dr. Butler is a Fulbright scholar focusing on cybersecurity and recently completed a service trip to Kosovo in Europe. He's very active in both professional and student-led cyber working groups. Dr. Butler, welcome, and with that, I give you control of the session.
Hey, thank you, Bill. And again, I'd like to welcome everyone to my presentation today. I hope I'm going to provide a lot of information along with the links. And I see we have cyber professionals as well as novice individuals from all over the world. And again, I hope this is very helpful to you today. So we'll begin. There we go. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so today, here's my agenda for the day. We're going to look at the critical infrastructure sector that I'll be discussing today. We'll look at some of the case studies from 2020, the year that just passed. We're going to look at the FBI strategy to combat cybercrime, since they're the lead agency here in the United States for combating cybercrime. We're going to look at some of the NSA's top 10 cybersecurity mitigation strategies. NSA, of course, provides a lot of solutions for some of these vexing issues that we have with these cyber attacks. And we're going to end it up with a Q&A. So as you may or may not know, as defined by the Department of Homeland Security, there are 16 critical sectors. I'm not here to talk about all of them, just one of them, critical infrastructure, as defined as that infrastructure that is required to run this country, and some of the infrastructure to also protect various aspects of our everyday lives, of our economy, of our national defense, our homeland security. These 16 critical infrastructures, and many of you are employed in them, by the way, and you know that there are issues in your aspect of critical infrastructure. So the one I'm going to focus on today is the information technology sector. So that includes what we normally associate with using computers, using networks, computing, the devices. All of those aspects of our everyday lives are included in the information technology sector. My personal belief is that in any computer that's connected to an enterprise network or is used to perform a critical function is critical infrastructure. And if you think about it, and it's more prominent even today, as we're working from home, we're working from our living rooms, we're working from our spare bedrooms, we're working out on the patio. And for some of us that are very lucky, you're working from the beach. I hear a lot of advertisements from Costa Rica and in Cancun asking you, and from the South, to move down there if you're working from home. And certainly if your computer is connected to your enterprise network, you are critical infrastructure. If you're compromised, you're only as safe as who you're connected to. You're only as safe as who you're connected to. So if one of your coworkers is compromised, then possibly the entire network will be compromised. And I provided a link at the bottom for you to go look at DHS's definitions of these critical infrastructures. Next, we're going to look at the case studies from 2020. These are case studies that were chosen from various sectors of the information technology sector, various examples. Some of these you're going to remember, some of these you may be hearing of the first time. Again, for the cybersecurity professionals out there, I have no insider knowledge. All the information is gathered from what is available to the public. Although I do have friends who probably have insider knowledge, I never seek that from them. So the first case study happened locally here, the Baltimore County Public School System. This is the category from K to 12 education. And this is the first case study. In this one, the K to 12 education, there was a ransomware attack against Baltimore County Public Schools. It happened just this past November 2020, and it closed the schools for 4 days. So some of you out there who have kids in that school system, you will recall the attack. The attack impacted 115,000 students. The schools are increasingly becoming targets because they usually have a lot of personal data and less sophisticated plans for securing that data and resources to deal with it. High schools, schools in this range just don't have the resources to mount an adequate defense in a lot of cases. According to the K-12 Cybersecurity Research Center, which tracks incidences at schools across the country, 50 school districts reported ransomware attacks from 2020, the year 2020. In 2019, the figure was 62. In 2018, only 11 were reported. And in this day and age, when we're using Zoom and other collaboration platforms, those platforms are also being attacked to deny our kids access to their education. There are various hacker groups who specialize in this space, as they do in other spaces, and we're going to see that here shortly. We don't know who the actor was. Still, no attribution has been assigned to that particular attack. And the next one, we have WHO, the World Health Organization. As some of you may or may not remember, around a year ago, this whole pandemic started to happen. And you know that as we started to seek, excuse me, a little sensitive there. As we started to seek the cure or a vaccine for COVID-19, we noticed that some of the pharmaceutical companies and the World Health Organization in particular became targets for hacking campaigns if they could get their hands on a vaccine or disrupt our ecosystem for developing vaccines and distributing vaccines throughout the globe. They sought to disrupt that technology that we have. So this occurred around April 2020. It resulted in the loss of some of the login credentials for 450 WHO staff who are all around the world, by the way, but also 25,000 email addresses from related. Remember, this is an ecosystem of health organizations. So as you heard me say earlier, you are only as secure as who you're connected to. All the regional and country-specific health organizations were also compromised because they email each other all the time. Again, there is no attribution to date. Again, some of you out there who work in some of these agencies may have an attribution done. I don't have access to that at this time, but we do know that we help these health organizations to harden their networks against these type of attacks, because we all want the pandemic to be over. And the way it's going to be over is we get these vaccines out and we cut down on the counterfeit vaccines that will begin to appear on the dark web, or you'll get an email. If you're not high on the list to get your vaccine, you may receive an email that says, hey, I got your vaccine right here. So be a suspect those types of emails. Only listen in the state of Maryland, listen to Governor Hogan. He'll give you all the information you need to get your vaccine, one that is legal. The next is Zoom. I think we all are familiar with Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. I can recall we had a Zoom hack as well. The first Cyber Saturday event that we held, we got Zoom bombed as well. So I'm familiar with this type of attack. But in particular, that they went after Zoom itself with ransomware. The ransomware attack happened again around April of 2020. They actually were able to stuff credentials. That's a particular type of attack to validate 500,000 account logins and made them available on the dark web. Think about that. 500,000 accounts available for sale on the dark web. So that possibly explains why a lot of us got Zoom bombed. Our credentials were for sale on the dark web. So credential stuffing is a 4-step technique where you find valid credentials from the information that is leaked from past compromises and from other services. Knowing that many people like to use the same username and password for different accounts, the attacker uses a list of compromised usernames and passwords and tries them in other services. In other words, don't be a one password cowboy, as we call it. Don't be a one password cowboy across all of your platforms, or you are leaving yourself open to this type of attack. Once they validate that you're using the same password across different platforms, that login information, again, is sold on the dark web to active credentials and current credentials. And in that attack, some of the credentials were used initially back in 2013. Some of you hadn't changed your password since 2013. Bad, shame on you if you're doing that. So don't be a one password person and leave yourself open to a compromise such as that. The next is FireEye. This one was particularly alarming because FireEye actually is the managed service provider for a lot of large corporations and probably some government agencies. Critical information was exfiltrated. It is a top cybersecurity corporation. It was discovered that a specialized rootkit was used to penetration test, and may have been stolen. One of their tools, basically, that FireEye uses to pen test its clients was stolen with some of the data, access to the data as well. So in backtracking, we had to look at how the tool set may have an exfiltrator. How did they get the tool out of the corporation? How did they get in? How did they get access to the tool? How did they exfiltrate the tool out of the organization? And what they discovered, what there was a backdoor from a previous update to the SolarWinds software suite. And the company's SolarWinds has been in the news quite a bit in this year. I'll talk about that a little later. This happened in March of 2020, not discovered until December of 2020. So we're talking 9 months of a compromise going undiscovered. And attribution has gone to Russia. They hadn't quite named what entity in Russia was probably behind this, but the attribution is never really final in the early stages. We still continue to investigate. Next is SolarWinds. I said I would get to it, and it's next. So this one's in the news even today. We've classified this one as a supply chain attack. And this particular one, it's been publicized in the news. It's still in the news because it has far-reaching impacts. And continues to have far-reaching impacts over the last 8 to 9 months. The hackers have access that long to what we feel like U.S. government networks, private sector networks, all because of this supply chain attacks gone undiscovered. It was actually the attack was discovered almost by mistake by an alert security operations operator who noticed some irregularities in just one account, someone trying to access an account in a very unusual way. These implications go all the way to NATO. They go to our friends in the United Kingdom, the European Parliament, Microsoft, you name it. SolarWinds has connections, is used by a large number of entities. So these credentials have been stolen from organizations. This group of hackers is very sophisticated. They designed this Trojan. This Trojan ran part of the SolarWinds update, and it continued to infiltrate organizations that use the SolarWinds platform. And we're still trying to assess the damage that has been done, all of the unauthorized access that is still occurring. That this is still an event that's unfolding before our very eyes. Next, Twitter. Some of you may be users of this platform. It's a social media platform for those who don't use it. I don't use Twitter, but I imagine just about everyone in this room does. So this occurred around July of 2020. And it was a voice phishing campaign through Slack. If any of you use Slack, is a very popular platform as well for collaborations for cybersecurity professionals like us. They originally gained access when a few of its Twitter employee accounts were compromised. Eventually, the hackers gained unlawful access to another 130 accounts, including those of stars, celebrities, the major public figures, like you may know some of these names: Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Kanye West, his wife Kim Kardashian, Joe Biden, and Barack Obama. A lot of statements were attributed to them, and they were basically able to claim it was not I, and they were actually right. in this case. So the hackers use the influential Twitter accounts to scam their fans and followers. That's pretty smart, say, asking them to send money to a cryptocurrency wallet, promising that the funds would be doubled as a charitable gesture to supporters who send the money within minutes of the initial tweets. Let's see, get the amount that they collected. Within minutes, they got 320 transactions and had already taken on one of the wallet addresses, Bitcoin in value of $120,000 had been deposited into one account before the scams were removed. So that was a very effective campaign. They probably would have got more if the company had shut down those accounts and gained access for the lawful owners of them. And the next one is Blackbaud. This was a ransomware attack. And this particular attack, was again a supply chain attack. It was Blackbaud is a cloud computing vendor. And in this attack against Blackbaud that occurred, they think between February and May of 2020, sometimes it's hard to do attribution down to the day that the compromise occurred. So going through the logs, they can actually ascertain a range. It is a cloud computing vendor. It's for not-for-profits, it's for foundations, some corporations, education institutions, healthcare entities, and change agents. Beginning in mid-August, the vendor began notifying some of its clients that it has fallen victim to a ransomware attack and that the hackers had exfiltrated data and began launching the malicious payload. Again, it goes back, you're only as secure as who you're connected to. Once an entity that you're connected to is compromised, it will only take an email or some sort of message or something connecting you to them to compromise your enterprise as well. So the next one is Garmin. Some of you may know Garmin because they make the GPS equipment, but they do other things as well. It is a navigation technology. This attack used a wasted locker ransomware disguised as a software update. This occurred in July of 2020. A lot happened around July of 2020, it looks like, resulted in the shutdown of Garmin's wearables. Some of you may even have this equipment, your health. If you're athletic and you like to wear the fitness watch, it also tracks your location and your mileage. Garmin applications, web services, even its call centers for a few days were down with this attack. It was reported that Garmin paid the ransomware. They paid the ransom $10 million, which we recommend that you don't pay the ransom. But in this case, they paid the ransom to unlock their files so that they can get back into business. And they did that around the August timeframe. And again, a Russian cybercrime group called the Evil Corporation. Attribution was assigned at that point. Another slide I made this year, 2020. Again, the SolarWinds was still dealing with that. It's up to 18 million identified customers that have been a victim to the. So this goes on into 2021. The second one you may have heard. Oh, excuse me. The second one you may have heard, this happened in the last couple of weeks, the Verkada the video cameras. Some of these cameras are actually, these cameras are installed in some of the later model automobiles that have the rear view cameras and cameras inside. The hackers were able to get in and able to view the video, download the video. So if you have one of these high-end cars with cameras, more than likely you may have been a victim. 150,000 cameras were compromised. And the last one here, the Microsoft Exchange email service compromised. We estimated over 30,000 affected customers in the United States and over 250,000 globally. This is, when you use the word huge, huge is not even big enough for this particular exploit. I think probably the higher percentage of folks in this room use Microsoft Exchange, and our IT staffs are working feverishly to get this compromise taken care of within your organization. Imagine hackers being able to read every email in your organization and able to send emails internally. That could be very devastating. And wanted to switch to the FBI. The current FBI Director, Christopher Wray, was speaking at the CISA National Security Summit in 2020. And here are some of the things that he said that the FBI is doing. And I've done a little research into cybercrimes, kind of like my side research, and I'm always interested in what agencies are responsible for what in terms of fighting cybercrime. It may be interesting for you to know that there are probably 18 or 19 federal agencies that have some responsibility in the fight against cybercrime. FBI is the lead of those agencies. One of the things they want to do, the FBI wants to play to the strength of partnerships. There is going to be legislation probably that is going to allow the government to partner with private sector to monitor the different threats out there, some sort of threat monitoring capability, some early warning capabilities. So if something is happening in one sector, they can immediately turn around and inform another sector, whether it be government or private, that these types of attacks are occurring. We have information on a hacker group that's active in a certain sector. Again, hacker groups like to specialize in certain, some specialize in banks, some specialize in schools, some specialize in law enforcement. Yes, law enforcement is attacked with ransomware more than you may think. One of the other things they wanted to do was address this threat through partnerships. They have the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force led by the FBI, and it has over 30 co-located agencies from the IC, the intelligence community, and law enforcement. Again, we need to share whatever data we have. I know being hacked is embarrassing, but at least it helps someone else in your sector to not fall victim to the same type of hack. And the also using the FBI's capability to battle a threat. Our strategy is still, if you can hunt down the perpetrators, this is crime fighting, right? If you can hunt down the, you can do attribution to the group that actually performed the hack. If you can identify, which we're very good at doing that, by the way, we can identify if you saw the indictment for the Russian hacking, the indictment actually named them by name, address, and down to the IP address that they use to perform. We do have these capabilities, but what we don't have sometimes is we can't extradite that individual from that country if we don't have an extradition treaty in place. But we can freeze their assets in the United States and within the EU and any of the partner nations that we have, freeze their assets. And if they ever travel outside of, I won't blame any one country. If you ever hit a EU country flying or the United States, you will be immediately arrested. So we do have that going for us. We can name and shame them around the world, and we can limit what they can do. They may make a lot of money, but they won't be able to spend it very many places. And here's an advisory. Many of you heard about the compromise of the U.S. water treatment facility. This just happened February 5th. Again, this happened in Pinellas County, Florida, very close to Tampa, Florida, by the way. We have had various incursions happen over the years, and we have some of you that are experts in critical infrastructure, especially in the operational technology arena. You know, these types of incursions are becoming more and more common, except that, again, an alert operator was able to detect that an intruder was trying to change the mix of chemicals in this water treatment facility, which could have resulted in a lot of residents there becoming sick with the wrong chemicals. This is just an example of what is going on around the country. And the FBI, jointly between CISA, part of DHS, and FBI, they are putting out these alerts and advisories. There is the address for that there, the actual link, you'll want to get on that distribution. If you're responsible for either advising cyber defense or protecting networks, you'll want to be, you probably already are on that list if you're smart. So they are very quick to put out advisories. They not only tell you what the problem is, they tell you how to fix it. How do you patch that software? Usually it's something to do with a software not being updated or some sort of exploit that is going to exploit that vulnerability that you may have. Here are some of the NSAs. I found these actually in the last couple of days because I wanted to, my main focus in cybersecurity is to help the consumer. That's always my focus, especially the individual consumer and the small businesses who may not be able to afford a cybersecurity person like me or like most of the people in this room. So they struggle a bit, and these recommendations can be, can be readily implemented by hiring someone for a short term, or there are beginning to be managed security companies that will actually provide capabilities on contract to a small business or an individual. So the first thing is the number one vulnerability is your software is unpatched. There's really no excuse for having software that's not patched, because the hackers know what's unpatched. You know what's unpatched. So it's up to us to keep up with those patches. The large companies, there's normally an individual whose whole purpose in life is to make sure that software is updated and it's patched and not vulnerable to an old attack that's 4 or 5 years old. There's no excuse for that. Defend privileges and accounts. We have something we call it least privilege. It's giving end user the right amount of rights that they need to do their job. You don't give a user more rights on the system than they need to do their job. So you're constantly reviewing that. You're making sure who has access to what. Do they have read-write access? Can they update things? Those types of things are something that we should be doing on a continuous basis. Signed software execution. Make sure that you've signed the software. And this is getting a little technical. A lot of you in the room probably know about this, but you can run software that is unsigned, and you can run software that is signed on your system. And then make sure your service provider or your CISO that are enforcing this type of restricted access for signed software only. A system recovery plan. What if you are hit? What if you lose your computer? A lot of us have had a laptop that actually died. How can you recover? We're talking hacks now, hit with ransomware. What if you don't pay the ransom? You got to figure out another way to continue to operate. And one of the ways, tried and true, is backup and restore. Make sure you're backing up that data. Hopefully not on the same system that was compromised, but that offsite backups. And the cloud computing has created a revolution in system recovery, continuity of operations and disaster recovery. You put that data in the cloud, you have a good chance of recovering from that ransomware attack without having to pay the ransom. It's not going to be cheap. You got to replace a lot of equipment. Going to lose a lot of man hours, but at least you're going to get your data back and get back on your feet. So always have a recovery plan, always back up and have you got to test that capability. Don't think just because you got a lot of backups, they're going to restore. I've seen restores actually fail. So make sure you're actually running tests on that. And actively manage systems and configurations. This is not the most exciting thing we talk about in cybersecurity. We must manage, we must enforce configurations. We must have a system to affect change on systems that is authorized. So make sure if you're running an enterprise, make sure you have a change management process, that you practice configuration management, because a system that is misconfigured is just as unsecure as not having security on it at all. So misconfigurations can be taken advantage of, just like anything else that a vulnerability hacker can find in your system. And the going on with this is the last slide. I think continuously to hunt for network intrusions. We've had a bit of a revolution too in cybersecurity with the insider threat. We used to look for the threat coming from outside. Now we're looking for the threat internally. There is lots of software out there that will assist us in looking at behavior of our employees on the system. So we've been able to detect attacks or compromises or the exfiltration of data, unauthorized exfiltration of data from our systems, and that's able to help us to detect the insider threat. So that's very important that you continuously look for network intrusions. Security features, number 7. Just because you have a firewall or intrusion detection system or a file server, it doesn't mean that it's configured properly. There are lots of security features that come on hardware and software. We don't always turn them on. And you are shooting yourself in the foot if you don't use all the security features. So misconfiguration of a system is a vulnerability. So make sure whoever you're using, that they're familiar with the product, that they know all the bells and whistles, how they work, what needs to be turned on and what can be left off. Network segmentation. This is something that we do in networks. If an intruder, we have to assume that we've been breached. With that assumption, if you segment the network, the intruder will not so easily be able to what we call the lateral movement across your network. You can confine the intruder to a segment of the network, confine them, isolate them, and be able to detect that you have attack. Number 9 is kind of new, threat reputation services. Get in the habit of using whitelist and using blacklist. If there's some site or user that you trust, put them on your whitelist. Had some research in the doctoral program on the power of you using whitelist to approve users on your network. So make sure you know the reputation. But believe it or not, we all, these reputation services are coming to individuals. There are companies out there who are trying to give you a reputation score. Some of you may have seen the reports coming out of China. They are using reputation services already. If you're an individual who does not have a high reputation score, you can't even travel out of your own province. Without a reputation score, you can't work for the government, the communist government. You can't get certain jobs. So these reputation services are beginning to, what we're talking about here is the reputation services of the threat. But I'm telling you that in the future, you're going to have a reputation score, whether you want it or not. And it may determine where you can live, not science fiction. It may determine where you can live, who you can marry, and where you can go to work. So look for that in the near future. And multi-factor authentication. Some of you are in enterprises that already have multi-factor authentication. Some of you use the Google services, for an example, as multi-factor authentication. Highly recommended that you go to that type of authentication. Stronger authentication is always good. Strong authentication is always good. And again, I have a link there for anyone that wants to go research these recommendations from our good friends at NSA. I always look to them to give us good, solid recommendations that work, because they take it to the lab and they have tested every one of these recommendations. And that is the end of the presentation. Bill, I would turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Butler. I appreciate that. It's been very interesting. What I want to do now is open the floor for questions. We have approximately 10 minutes for questions if we need it. What I'd like you to do is just type in your question. It might be a comment. Many of you are experts in the field and you'd like to make a comment about something that the presenter has said. Feel free to type that in. We'll monitor that and we'll look for that. In the meanwhile, while we wait for those to start up, we had a slide a little earlier when you were talking about that cyber attack that occurred at the water treatment plant in Pinellas County. And if I read everything correctly, it says that it looked to me like they were using Windows 7 as the operating system for controlling their water treatment plant. Was that true? And is that a common problem? I mean, because we all know that Windows 7 is not being supported anymore, not being updated. If someone were in that instance, a public entity still using antiquated software, what is the immediate thing that they should do? Should they immediately, because it's integrated, right? It's not just Windows 7. It's integrated into their total proprietary system, and so it's not an easy fix. Just say I'll go to Windows 10. But what should they do immediately?
Yes, that's a very good question. We often find, of course, that water treatment plant is critical infrastructure, very old usually, and it's a new era for them as well, Bill. They have not been connected to the internet, and now they're beginning more and more in the nuclear power plants, transportation systems. So having the oldest version of operating systems hasn't really been that big a deal for them. You can even go to some retail stores, those cash registers are sometimes running on a Windows 7 or some older operating because they didn't need the features of Windows 10. The vulnerabilities of Windows 7 are well known to everyone. And so that, as I said before, the hackers know the vulnerabilities. They research just like we do. So and that is true, that are in critical infrastructure. Some of the embedded systems, control systems are running on antiquated operating systems. Once they connect to the internet, it's a new day for them. They have a whole new set of threats out there that are looking to gain access to that system, take advantage of that system. Sometimes they can take over that system if those vulnerabilities are still there. So yes, Bill, once critical infrastructure, the old infrastructure connects to the internet, we've got a problem, and that's just an example of it.
All right. I'm going to return now to the questions. Thank you for your answer, by the way. Rizard asks, can you talk a little bit about advances in FRCS?
FRCS, I'm not sure if I know what you're referring to with that question.
Okay, Rizard, if you could spell that out for us, we'll come back to you. Anthony asks, how do you see the role of AI for predictive analysis to predict the possible attacks in the future, especially dealing with ransomware?
That's a good question. We are here at Capitol, we're keenly aware of the role of not only analytics in trying to predict attacks, but also artificial intelligence to try to build up some this decision-making capability around the analytics that we're seeing. We all know that in certain attacks, for an example, there are certain things that we can detect. Certain protocols begin to be used more, certain activity begins to rise on our networks, certain activity begins to rise from certain locations where the attack was launched. With the beauty, no human can keep up with this. You hear me say that a lot when I talk about cyber analytics. It is beyond the capability of humans, and that's why we need AI, and we need the algorithms to help us determine what should we be looking at, what do we think is about to happen, to make predictions. How should we respond to that? AI is because we've seen malicious software, malware, that is guided by AI. And this malware, just like an organic virus, can evolve based on the defenses that we're using. This is very dangerous. So it's going to take AI to defeat, it is going to take AI software to defeat the AI threat that's out there. It is out there already, Bill. So that's a good question.
Okay, there was another question very related to that, so we'll move on. Rizard has now indicated what FRCS, facility-related control systems, and he expands the question by saying, are newer facility-related control systems designed to counter virus spreading malicious behaviors such as segmentation you mentioned, or fail-safe to manual or local control mode?
Okay, I can address a part of that. The area that he's talking about is these smart buildings. We have, and traditionally we had the information technology manager, the IT running the IT part of the building, and the facilities manager running what we traditionally thought to be for facilities, the alarm systems, the elevators, environmental controls. As we evolve those systems toward connecting to the internet, we have a huge overlap right now, Bill. So we have, in some cases, the facilities managers say, well, that used to be mine now, whose is it? It's connected to the internet. It is, and some view that as being now the responsibility of the IT manager along with the security officer to secure those systems. And I'm saying that because we now are able to apply the security measures that you traditionally associate with an IP network. The most of the networks that we're on, we have to apply those same principles to these smart buildings that we have. To these smart buildings. So these smart buildings are more than just a smart building. It is a network. It's a computer, huge computer with a network. And we need to start to look at, as these old systems are just like the Windows 7 water treatment. That's one thing. But now these newer buildings, they are just as modern as any network or any system that we have today. So we apply the same principles. So he's right in that segmentation, strong authentication, all the things that we do on our normal networks, we got to do in these smart buildings and this smart infrastructure that we have.
All right, thank you very much. I'm looking here through there. There was a question having to do with, I cannot find it right now. Hold on. Bear with me. Let me go back to your slide. I think that's where it was located. Threat reputation services. Several callers wanted to have you expand a little bit on what that involves.
Okay. There are in our field now. There are some specialties that are emerging called threat intelligence. And these individuals actually are in some of the three, not to get into the classified world, but there are some individuals that are assigned to look at the threat organizations out there. There are some that know all of the advanced persistent threats in Russia and China, that they know these organizations. They actually know, in some cases, they actually know what time the hacker gets up, what they have for breakfast, when they go to bed, and when they're working. That's how much threat intelligence is going, and this intelligence is for sale. And that, I think I talked about something a little bit different than that when I related it to the consumers, but we need threat intelligence. When we're hit with a hack, we must immediately try to identify what were their techniques or TTPs to try to figure out who hit us. And once we figure out who hit us, we know how they operate. We know the playbook because we have studied them. When we create this ecosystem of the private sector and government working together, sharing intelligence, sharing operational events that are ongoing, that are happening, once we start to do that, and we start to know our enemy a little better, we can respond to them better. So this whole threat reputation area and threat intelligence area is a growing area. It is a specialty, Bill, now to go into threat intelligence. Hang out in the dark web, not to buy Bitcoin, but to watch and learn what they're doing. What are they selling on? It's kind of sad. Some banks don't know their credit cards have been compromised until they're for sale on the dark web. That's how much threat intelligence does for us. It tells us what's for sale. We know who's been compromised, and they don't even know they've been compromised in some cases.
Thank you. Related to that, several questions had to do specifically with reputation scores. If you could expand just a little bit more. I think it's related to this, but.
Yeah, it's not exactly what that was talking about, but I think I mentioned China. You can go on YouTube right now and you can type that in and it will tell you extensively what China is using it for. And I don't think the United States is too far behind. We're going to use it for we're not going to restrict your travel or anything like that, or restrict the job you get or who you marry or where you live. But what is going to happen, you are going to, just like your credit score, they're going to take your criminal background, your credit score, and some other factors to determine how trustworthy are you. How trustworthy are you? So it could be used for certain jobs, executive level jobs, for an example, they're already doing something similar, or we just don't know what's going on. I'm just letting you know what's going on. They're already, the building blocks are in place to put a reputation score in place for every American. And what it's going to be used for, if the Congress doesn't get in there and put some a ethical framework around it, then it could be used for some very nefarious purposes. They could go the direction of China, where there will be restrictions on your life if your reputation score doesn't fall into a certain range. So yes, the building blocks are in place. It could happen here. We need to get ahead of this. There are some ethical issues that Congress needs to deal with when it comes to that.
No kidding, there are some ethical issues there. Wow, sounds like the stuff of sci-fi movies, does it not?
There's actually a movie that talks about this.
There are two questions, and just to warn everybody, we just only have about a minute or two left for questions. There are two questions having to do with critical infrastructure in relation to research that Capitol is doing, and also a question having to do with the recent failure of the Texas Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, which caused a massive critical infrastructure failing just recently. Now, we have with us today Dr. Ronald Martin, who is heads up our critical infrastructure umbrella at Capitol. I've given him panelist authority, and so Dr. Martin, if you have any comments regarding these two questions, basically, what is Capitol doing in the area of overall critical infrastructure research, and also was it a critical infrastructure failure that occurred with the recent Texas storms?
Yeah, let me just really quick cover that. What happened is that this preventative maintenance in the Texas storms, one of the problems was that they didn't do the infrastructure winterization. That's the first thing. Second thing is they didn't have rolling grid support. In other words, each one of the municipalities was autonomous to themselves, which they couldn't go to a neighboring jurisdiction and get electrical power. So when the temperature went down and they had a demand on electric, they couldn't do it. Now, that being said, one of the lessons learned, and we're still talking about that, is not only that, but in a few other places where you have problems with that, the electrical grid is one of our most sensitive pieces there. At Capitol, we are doing research. I have some doctoral students that are doing some research right now on securing industrial control systems. Yes, we are doing that. We have assessment tools and those types of things that we're researching. So yes, we are doing that to try to give our students a jump start on assisting the critical infrastructure industrial control system arena. Hope that answers the question, Bill.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ron Martin. Now I'm going to revert back to Dr. William Butler for the final question. And there are other questions, but we're just simply running out of time. Ronnie asked, does Capitol Tech have a cyber lab that replicates ICS SCADA attacks in order to gain a better understanding of what could be recognized when threat hunting?
Yes, glad you asked that question. As a matter of fact, we do. A matter of fact, in this lab that's actually directed by Dr. Martin, we have identity management is one of the areas, and Internet of Things is the other area that we look at. We actually have within the lab, we have some of the infrastructure that you find in a building. They actually have a visitor management system. We have false doors and things like that you can gain access to, build credentials. We also have what we call a IoT discovery board. And the discovery board has various smart light bulbs. Yes, these light bulbs are very smart. You just actually talk to it, turn red, turn green, turn off, turn on. We have temperature control systems. We have a coffee pot. What we're looking at from our security operations is can we monitor the traffic within a home that's IoT enabled, for an example, and can we detect when an intruder is inside your network? Can we detect when an intruder from the outside is trying to gain access to your network, can we detect if the information that's reported from those devices is going to someone outside of your home? So that's one of our doctoral students is looking at that, is that when you put an IoT controller in your home to aggregate all the IoT, you got a lot of IoT devices in your home, whether you know it or not, and they all call home. Our project is to try to at least have those devices controlled from one controller, so at least you'll know where they're reporting the data from your home into. So yes, we are doing a lot of research in that area.
All right, we'll stop there. That's not that that's the last question, but we just simply have to move on. And I do apologize if we did not get to your question. The email address there with Dr. Butler, if you have a question that was not answered, feel free to send that on to him and he'll answer that or forward it to Dr. Martin or anyone else at the Capitol staff and faculty who can answer that question for you. Now, let's just move on just very quickly. We are almost done. We want to stop at the top of the hour and be faithful to your schedules. We have 3 upcoming webinars in the next 6 weeks or so, next 2 months. Applied Artificial Intelligence Applications and Future Directions with Dr. Robert Steele, The Future of Technology and Education with Hayden Land, and Construction Safety Advancements with Dr. Linda Martin. All 3 of these are wonderful webinar presenters. The sessions, you can sign, if you've not yet signed up for them, you can by going to this address, captechu.edu/webinar-series. You can sign up for those or other webinars. All webinars we've already done through the year. We've done a number of them in 2020, and so far this year are available as well as on demand. Now, speaking of that, I will be sending to everyone who registered for this session today a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. And so watch for that email. In the email, it will also give you the opportunity to request a certificate of completion. All CapTech Talk webinars are worth 1 hour of listening pleasure, if you will, and we are happy to offer you a certificate free of charge for participating with us. We do that both for the live session people and also for those viewing it on demand. All you need to do is simply respond to my email when I send it out. I'll be happy to provide a certificate for you. Now, with that, we are officially done. We're right on schedule. I want to thank you for joining us today. I particularly want to thank our presenter, Dr. Butler, as well as Dr. Martin for chiming in there at the end to answer those questions. We will send you an email later this afternoon or early in the morning how to get the participation certificate. Will also include a link to the recording and how to get a hold of the slides. I'd like to thank you again for your involvement with the session today and your participation. I hope we've answered your questions. Thank you again, Dr. William Butler, for a wonderful job. I've appreciated all of your remarks. I've learned a lot. I'm a little more scared than I used to be, but I think it's a good scare. I think that the importance of understanding the threats and understanding the mitigation to prevent those threats from becoming a reality is important for all of us. For all of you who are involved in cybersecurity and protecting our critical infrastructure and protecting the resources in your company or organization, thank you. You're doing a great job, and I appreciate what you're doing. With that, we will close. You all have a great afternoon. You may log out at any time.